What's up, YouTube? Capital G here, checking out the brand new pot of Indulgence coming out of Savage Strike. And oh my goodness, these last 48 hours have just been crazy. We got two different ban lists, a bunch of promos revealed. Now we got cards from Savage Strike and other sets. This is almost like a YouTubing overload, man. I don't even know where to go when it comes to giving you guys content at this point. I'm just kind of throwing everything out there. But this is a card that a lot of people were super hyped about. I mean, I talked about this card when Konami kind of first showed it to us. We didn't know what it did. We knew it was probably going to be a pot card, and since it has pot agreed on it, it was a reasonable expectation for it to let us draw two cards in some manner or form. And I put that video out and it got like 30,000 views, so just the mention of a new pot card got people just on cloud 9. And this is definitely a card that has a lot of potential. I will tell you guys right now, I don't think that this is a pot for everybody, but I look at Pot of Desires and I don't think that that's a pot for everybody either. I mean, Pot of Desires is an awesome card and I understand the +1, but you know, personally, I don't really like playing Pot of Desires too much because a lot of times it just fucks up the consistency of my decks. But I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna focus on Pot of Indulgence, and we'll definitely break this card down. So Pot of Indulgence, normal spell card. At the start of your main phase 1, banish either 3 or 6 of your face down extra deck cards randomly face down. Draw 1 card for every 3 cards you banish. Also, you cannot draw cards with card effects for the rest of the turn. Alright, so on its face value, this is a draw 2 pot card. Just like Pot of Desires, just like Pot of Average, just like the old school Pot of Greed. Most of these good pot cards let you draw 2 instantly. This one definitely has a condition, and it's interesting because it lets you actually choose whether you want to draw 1 or 2. Kind of at the cost of how much risk you want to kind of incorporate into the activation condition, because you can banish 6 of your extra deck cards face down randomly, which, I mean, I don't know exactly how, does your opponent do it, or do you like shuffle your extra deck? That's something I've like never done in Yu-Gi-Oh! But at the same time, I look at that draw too, and I mean, let's be real, guys. What is the Arc V era taught us about cards like Pot of Desires and Card of Demise, and you know, these cards that let you draw? Generally, if a card lets you draw 2 cards in Yu-Gi-Oh!, people are going to be able to, or they're going to be willing to sacrifice their right nuts to get those 2 draw 2s, or to, excuse me, to get those 2 drawn cards. And really, when I look at this, I don't really think the sacrifice of your extra deck is really all that big, because if you're playing, first off, like an anti-meta or stun deck, like if you're playing border control, or I don't know, you're playing like barrier statues, you're not using your extra deck anyways. Even something like my Altergeist, the only 2 cards that most Altergeist players will say they really go into are Link Karibo and Altergeist Hextian. You can run 3 of those just to make sure you never banish those. Now, the fact that you have to activate it at the start of your main phase 1, I think is really what kind of keeps this card in check. It keeps it from being too broken, because I don't know, maybe there's a situation where your opponent has a Tri-Gate Wizard. This means that this has to be kind of the first thing that you throw out there. You can't try to bait your opponent with something else. However, there was another card that had to be activated at the start of main phase 1, and that card ended up being fucking broken. It's called Cold Wave. Maybe you heard of it. It basically like defined the Glad format and Synchro Cat and all that good stuff. So I think that that will be the major limitation. The fact that you can't draw cards for the rest of the turn, I don't really think is going to be that big of a deal, because a lot of times when you see players activate like Pot of Desires, they don't generally go through a bunch of other cards. I mean, maybe a deck like True Draco will activate Desires and Card of Demise in the same turn, but I think I'd be perfectly content just getting my 2 cards and basically going on with the rest of my turn. But overall, I really like this new pot, and I think the card's fantastic. It obviously didn't need to be a hard once per turn, because it doesn't let you draw any more cards for the rest of the turn, so you wouldn't be able to activate, well, I guess you would be able to activate a second one, but you wouldn't draw, so that would be kind of pointless. This is definitely not a pot for everybody. I think that this is very, very similar to Desires, because I am personally a person who doesn't really like Desires. Every time I activate it, I end up screwing up my main deck and banishing a 1 of or something like that I'm going to need later in the duel. But for players who rely on their extra deck, like if you're playing Pendulums, you cannot afford to banish your only Electromites, or if you're playing Burning Abyss, don't even think about the potential of banishing your 1 and only copy of something like Beatrice, or banishing 2 of your Dantes and then you can't win. This card will be good, and I think that it will see some play. It's just going to see play in decks that, you know, don't really rely on their extra deck, a lot of like stun decks. And as a player who doesn't generally build decks that like spam out of the extra deck, this card's kind of suited for somebody like me. So you guys let me know what you think. Also, let me know what the rarity is going to be. when Pot of Indulgence comes to the table. Who am I kidding? This shit's gonna be a secret rare. It's gonna be a secret rare in the TCG because that's how Konami gets down. Anyways, thank you guys for watching. As always, subscribe if you have not already and turn on that notification bell for daily videos.